As explosive as its title, Demolition Man marries the cinematic action of the 80s with a seeming utopia which, as always, reveals its true form as a twisted dystopia. Kickstarting in 1996, we find controversial supercop John Spartan, also known as a Demolition Man, hot on the heels of career criminal Simon Phoenix, a powerful gang leader that has set up a large and dangerous territory for himself.
See, I told the city, I said, look, nobody comes down here. Postmen figured it out, policemen figured it out, but the goddamn bus drivers just wouldn't listen.
After Phoenix kidnaps a busload of hostages to his headquarters, Spartan tracks him down and completes a thermal scan, suggesting there are no hostages inside. The two face off and the building comes down on their heads, and although Phoenix ends up in cuffs, the police drag out the bodies of all the hostages and assert Spartan's actions had killed them. Despite insisting that Phoenix had deliberately rigged the place to explode and that he'd done a thermal scan of the building and found only Phoenix and his goons there, Spartan is charged with involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 70 years in a new prison where inmates are cryogenically frozen and subjected to behavioral reconditioning.
You've done great deeds for the city of Los Angeles, so it is with some regret that I hereby carry out this sentence.
Skip it.
36 years later in 2032, the prison is still in operation. Los Angeles has changed considerably, having become a community of peace. The cities of LA, Santa Barbara and San Diego have merged into one massive urban center after a giant earthquake devastated most of Southern California, and the San Angeles Police Department hasn't dealt with a violent crime in over 16 years. At the center of it all is the seemingly benevolent, influential thinker, Dr. Raymond Cocteau.
This radical terrorist behavior led by Mr. Friendly must not be allowed to undermine our safety.
Phoenix finds himself unfrozen for a parole hearing, and after somehow knowing the password to his restraints, unlocks his shackles and attacks the guards, before tearing out the warden's eye to bypass the prison's retinal scanners. At the SAPD's headquarters, the police force are alerted by their central computer, L7, of a code 187, which they don't recognize, until L7 identifies it as a murder-death-kill, something they hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades. Horrified by these crimes and their inability to contain Phoenix, led by Officer Lenina Huxley, the police decide to unleash his nemesis, the Demolition Man.
He's clearly the man for a job such as this.
The Demolition Man's an animal.
Simon Phoenix is an old-fashioned criminal. We need an old-fashioned cop.
And so Spartan is thawed, reinstated to the police force, and informed that his wife was killed in the big earthquake of 2010, while his daughter's whereabouts were unknown. To make things worse, when he asks for a cigarette, he's told that unhealthy vices and foods from the past have now become illegal. He's also told that he's had a microchip implanted in his hand so his location can be monitored at all times. Spartan objects immediately, criticizing the fascist New World Order and their inability to understand a criminal like Phoenix. Realizing that Phoenix's immediate plan is to arm himself and continue his terrorist activities, they rush to the museum, the only place where you can get weapons. Phoenix is able to escape through the museum's roof, but when he runs directly into Cocteau and tries to shoot him, he finds that he's unable to pull the trigger. Cocteau then tells Phoenix that he should actually be hunting a man named Edgar Friendly, his ideological opponent, and the leader of a resistance group called the Scraps who live below the ground.
You don't know how lucky you are that Maniac didn't whack you.
Well, I must say that whacking, whatever it is, sounds most disagreeable.
When Spartan approaches, Cocteau insists that he's grateful that he quote-unquote saved his life, and invites him and Huxley to dinner at Taco Bell, hilariously, the only restaurant left after an event called the Franchise Wars. Spartan is clearly a fish out of order, and at dinner, Cocteau and his guests grill him about his unruly methods and vulgar language. Of course, like us, he takes most of the criticism as a compliment, and makes mention of the fact that he was actually conscious when he was being frozen, and that he remembers seeing his wife outside his ice block. Cocteau dismisses these claims as Spartan spots shady-looking people outside the restaurant and runs after them. He takes them down, but stops when they drop a container of food stolen from the restaurant. The overexcited Huxley praises Spartan for his hand-to-hand combat, but he scolds her, saying that the people he'd roughed up were just trying to get something to eat.
I fleshed you out as some blow-up-the-bad guy with a happy grin He-Man type, but now I realize that you're the moody, troubled-past gunslinger who will only draw when he must type.
Telling him that the evening's violence has aroused her, Huxley takes Spartan to her apartment and politely asks if John will have sex with her. She then places a helmet on his head, which uses a form of sensory induction to stimulate their brains directly. John is obviously appalled, preferring physical contact like a man, but Huxley explains that physical contact and fluid exchange are illegal because of sexually transmitted diseases. Getting past the honest misunderstanding, the two are emboldened by the mystery surrounding Phoenix and access L7's records on him, finding that he'd been given a rehab program to turn him into an even more violent sociopath than he'd been in the 90s. Cocteau also reveals to Phoenix that he'd altered the villain's rehab program, so he'd murder Edgar Friendly and the rest of the resistance that live in the ruins. These scraps are a constant annoyance to Cocteau, who wants them wiped out.
but it's gonna be a little bit more difficult than you thought. I'll need about 5 or 6 more special men.
Fine.
Old LA has a bad reputation, a component of Cocteau's propaganda no doubt, leaving the officers surprised by the fact that life is relatively normal down there when they go looking for Phoenix and Friendly.
They don't seem very hostile, John Spartan.
No, they don't.
Spartan and Huxley find Edgar, who tells them he's not a fan of Cocteau's dictatorship and would rather live his life in abject poverty and be free underground than be a rich slave above. As Phoenix escapes to the surface and steals a squad car, Huxley and Spartan tear after him in an antique 1970 Oldsmobile 442. Revealing to Spartan that he'd already killed all the boss passengers in 1996, Phoenix escapes again and has one of his men murder Cocteau. With this, he's granted access to the cryo prison and plans to thaw out more criminals, many of whom were incarcerated by Spartan. After killing all the technicians in the last stages of freeing the prisoners, he's finally confronted by Spartan, who freezes him and knocks his head off as the cryo prison explodes.
How will we live?
I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna go out drinking, all of us, get shit-faced and...
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Why don't you get a little dirty? You will act clean. And somewhere in the middle, you'll figure it out.
The ending in the movie seems to present a more middle-of-the-road solution. John basically says that the scraps and those living under Cocteau's rules should work together and find a balance between personal freedoms and established boundaries. That being said, the main message seems to be take everything in moderation. There should be no extremes on either side.
Kissing's not allowed? Damn, I was a good kisser.
What are you doing?
Breaking the law.
You are a savage creature, John Spartan.
What I love about this film is that at first sight, San Angeles is a utopia. No crime, no clear class divides, no unnecessary deaths, and general levels of happiness and well-being going through the metaphorical roof. But there's good reason to be afraid of this world. Masterminded by a single man, beneath the cracks is unrestrained rage towards the people the system is purported to be helping.
Hurting people's not a good thing. Well, sometimes it is, but not when it's a bunch of people looking for something to eat.
We're then shown the other side of the coin, and in the underbelly of the utopia, Edgar Friendly peddles his libertarian ideologies to us, explaining,
See, according to Cocteau's plan, I'm the enemy, because I like to think, I like to read. I'm into freedom of speech and freedom of choice.
And Edgar isn't kidding about no freedom of choice. Even restaurants are all the same. All food chains have become Taco Bell or Pizza Hut depending on what version of the movie you're watching. This is a silly footnote to everything else in the story, but if there's one thing that's key to utopian dystopian narratives, it's this idea of monolithic corporate control.
You do not realize that Pizza Hut was the only restaurant to survive the franchise wars. So? Now all restaurants are Pizza Hut.
No way.
The film pretty clearly presents that Cocteau is the bad guy, and that trying to control everyone's impulses will only result in more trouble. Even Phoenix, pure evil villain that he is, declares,
Look, you can't take away people's right to be assholes.
and he's right. As the movie shows, taking away freedom of choice just leads to a life full of repression. You can see this in how Huxley longs for excitement, chaos, and even sex. I mean, in this world, you can't even have butter or salt because it's bad for you. So of course you're going to end up with defectors like Edgar, and a large majority that secretly yearn for the old ways. Demolition Man shares a lot of its DNA with the 1932 book Brave New World, which was written by Aldous Huxley, be it the use of subliminal messaging, referred to as hypnopedia in the book, the societal brainwashing resulting in a warped moral code, the omniscient leader, a changed perception of sex, to the frequent use of the word savage. Perhaps the most interesting element in both is the discussion of subliminal psychological manipulation to shape individuals. In Demolition Man, this takes the form of rehabilitation of those in the penitentiary, while in the book, it takes a far more sinister turn, using this type of manipulation as the very foundation of society. In Brave New World's London, children are exposed to overt psychological manipulation to make them more useful members of society. These forms of manipulation make society homogeneous and unable to dissent, particularly in the case of workers who are shown stimuli to essentially love industry and city, and despise literature, art, and the natural world. The scariest thing about these foundations for dystopia is that they align perfectly with tried and tested psychological techniques. While Brave New World relies on classical conditioning for this, having people shocked when looking at certain stimuli, Demolition Man takes on the more complex form of subliminal suggestion, where thoughts and beliefs are changed outside of our conscious awareness, something seen in Phoenix through his incomprehensible ability to interface with future technology, and Spartan's ability to, well, knit.
Thank you for the lovely gift.
Look, I don't know what you guys put into my cryo slush, but when I thawed out, the first thing I wanted to do was knit.
It's part of your rehab program.
Together, these point towards methods in which people could be, and in some cases already are, manipulated into certain schools of thought at odds with our individuality and personal freedoms. The utopia of Demolition Man is a response to increased political correctness and the ways that government can intervene upon your personal freedoms by deciding what is right and healthy for you. In San Angeles, you get fined for cursing, you can't touch anyone, no one can even have sex for what is assuredly population control. Every facet of what it means to be human has been stripped away in favor of collective obedience in the name of peace. Though the initial critical response of Demolition Man was lukewarm, people now praise it for how well it predicted things like restrictions on how much soda you can purchase, increased surveillance, or getting slaps on the wrist if your language is too obscene. Beyond its complex themes, terrific set pieces, and commitment to bringing us a terrifying dystopia, the performances that help sell it can't be ignored. Wesley Snipes is anarchy personified and his Joker-like turn is Phoenix. Stallone is amazing as the gun-ho unstoppable force, and Sandra Bullock is solid as Huxley, who is responsible for easing us into this world inspired by her namesake. The true dystopia of Demolition Man goes far deeper than the fact that all restaurants turn into Taco Bell. By harking back to Brave New World and linking itself to disturbingly real psychological techniques, while employing a fireworks show of action, Demolition Man manages to break the mold of intellectualized dystopias by creating something that is far too close to home.
You're out of toilet paper.
Did you say toilet paper?
He doesn't know how to use the 3 seashells.
Thanks a lot, you shit. So much for the seashells.